Hope you guys enjoy this new part of What If Luffy Was in My Academia Season 2. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you in the video. We start this season off with a flashback. All Might is talking to Izuku and Luffy. All Might would then be turned into his Small Might form and explained why he had to talk to both of them. Izuku Midoriya, I had to talk to you about One For All, but I also had to talk to Luffy. Luffy, you seem to admire Gold Deed Roger, right? As Luffy would smile, as he said, yeah, I do. As when All Might looked at Luffy, he could only see Roger himself. All Might would sigh, and then I had to talk to both of you. Look, One For All, it was passed down from user to user. You see, I am the 9th user of One For All, and the 8th user was Gold D. Roger. But he had to pass it down onto me 20 years ago. Izuku would be confused. 20 years ago? Wait, that was... As All Might would explain, there used to be an island called God Valley. It was a resort. People would go and visit it from time to time. Do you know why that island doesn't exist anymore? As Izuku would pop in. Because of a meteor hit it, right? All Might would chuckle to himself. No, that's not it at all. See, what had happened was Gold Roger and the great hero Garp fought a villain of villains, I should say. This man's name was Rox D. Zebek, and he was the worst of the worst. He would kill millions just for fun. He'd rule organizations, so pretty much capitalized. He had enough money to sustain himself. He owned the police. It didn't matter what he did. In his eyes, it wasn't illegal. He wanted to live in a world where laws didn't exist. And he was so close to achieving it. Two people stood in his way, though. Gold D. Roger and the great hero Garp. They fought, and they fought for hours among hours, until Gold Roger had an idea. He told Garp to go to the island, the main island of Japan, as he was about to destroy God Valley to kill Rox D. Zebek. Garp begged and pleaded, but it didn't matter. At the end of the day, Roger killed Rox, but at the same time destroying God Valley. But this had some repercussions. Bits and pieces of God Valley shot across Japan like meteorites, and thus killed a lot of people. But as one would say, you can't have to break a dozen eggs to make a few omelets. And sadly, those people died as an after effect of the fight between Gold D. Roger and Rox D. Zebek. As Luffy would have a frown but would repeat his smile, so he died a hero. All Might would slam his fist on the table. He died being reckless. He wasn't a hero, he was a vigilante. He shouldn't have been there in the first place. As Luffy would smile. Vigilante, hero, they're the same thing, you know that, right? One's just not legally registered. All Might would almost get close to punching Luffy as he was trying to get his point across. He'd clear his throat. What I'm trying to say is, Luffy, it's a dangerous idea trying to idolize a man like him without even knowing the dangerous things he's done, the ways he's hurt people. As All Might would state, he's a villain. Luffy would smile. He's not a villain. It's just the way you see him. Luffy would stand up as he'd yawn. Anyway, I'm getting hungry and I'm tired. If that's all you wanted to tell me, well, you're not going to get from my thick skull. As Luffy would begin to walk away, All Might would sit there in shame. Damn it. Everybody would ask Luffy and Izuku why All Might needed to talk to him, but Luffy said it was a boring lecture about being a hero and stuff like that. As they would then think that it was something like All Might thinking they're like prodigies, which Bakugo would take slight offense. But Aizawa would continue with his announcement. Alright, now that the entire class is here, he'd slam the papers on the table. Listen, the UA Sports Festival is still gonna be in order, no matter what. So, that just means, as Luffy would smile, I'll get to win. As Bakugo would yell at Luffy, like you could ever. Luffy would then point at Bakugo's burn mark on his face. Yeah, well, it seems that I could. As Aizawa would then state, class is dismissed as well as school. You get 2 weeks to train. Use them wisely. As Aizawa would then, as he's leaving, would look back to the class. And remember, this isn't about glory or fame. Heroes are watching you. It's about getting an internship. Remember that. As he'd walk away. God damn. We then see Izuku at home eating dinner. He's with Garp, Ace, and Sabo as they would talk about their day. Ace and Sabo would bring up the fact that Luffy and Izuku's names came up on the announcements, and that they had to talk to All Might. Ace would try and cut in. Hey, what did All Might need to talk to you about, huh? Izuku would frown. He wanted to talk to me about, as Garp would look and sigh. Was it about Gold D. Roger again, boy? As Izuku would just yell, look, I know you don't like him, but I don't know why All Might doesn't like him. As Garp would slam his fist on the table. You don't understand why I don't like him. As Izuku, as Luffy would kind of frown. Look, I'm sorry, it's just, you don't understand the things that man has done. I respect him, but doesn't mean I don't like him. But I will say, was he talking to you about a certain incident? Izuku would frown. He was talking about God Valley. As Garp would sit down. Look, Gold D. Roger has done many things. He has stolen, robbed banks, but I will admit, he has done some pretty good things. He has, well, killed a man like Zabak. That's the only thing I can ever respect him. It's the only time I ever actually had fun being side by side. As Ace would stand up. Wait a minute, you said the only time you ever had fun standing side by side, right? Doesn't that imply you guys teamed up a lot more times, huh? As Garp would almost smile as he was recalling his glory days, fighting big villains, small villains. Yeah, they teamed up a lot. They used to be friends even, but nowadays it's him. As Saba would ask, well, he had great respect for him, even had a lot of fun with him. What made you hate him so much? As Garp would frown, he did the worst sin of all. He left his son. He left his wife. For what? Fame, glory? He didn't have to go fight Zabek with me. I could have done it myself. As Ace would ask, well, how is the wife and kid now? Maybe they just grew up to be great people, huh? Scarp would look at Ace and look at Sabo and look at Luffy, and he would think to himself in his own mind, you will have no idea. They grew up to be real great people. And Scarp would state, anyway, I'm full. I heard the UA Sports Festival is going to come on soon. I'm going to be there, as Ace would yell broadly. I'm, of course, going to be there. I'm going to watch you and Sabo beat everybody. And Sabo would chuckle. I don't know about that. As Luffy would look at Sabo. What, you think that you're not the strongest in your class? Sabo would poke Luffy's nose, as he would then state, unlike you, I'm more humble. As Luffy would smack Sabo's hand away. I'm humble. It's just I know I can't beat the teachers. As Ace would chuckle. They all head to bed, and the next day, they all trained for the UA Sports sports festival. Luffy was training his gears, more specifically Gear 1, but was trying to figure out a way. His main problem when training with Ace is that he's too slow. With Sabo, he's not strong enough, and he can't gain a large area. He can't cover that as much. So he thought about it for around 2 weeks and eventually figured it out. His Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd. He studied the human body, the human anatomy. He kind of needed to learn it so he can figure out things he can do with his own body that a normal human can't. And he figured it out. His entire body is rubber, which means it also has the property to stretch and compress, which means it also can hold in air and press out air like a balloon. Luffy then figured out Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd. He'd pump blood manually to his heart and thus pumping blood to his muscles, making them faster and stronger, his Gear 2nd. He'd then pump blood into his bones, making them bigger, keeping its density, well, mostly, which means his fists were a lot bigger, but still were extremely strong. But these two gears had side effects. First off, for Gear 2nd, if he doesn't finish off an opponent in time, he will think to himself that he should think of better ways to use his gears. But the sports festival was around a week away, and there isn't enough time to just cover things up. Now he has to think of techniques. He hones his abilities until the sports festival commences. Luffy gets into his UA costume. Well, not costume, attire. Along with all of his other classmates. He sees Izuku's and he talks to Izuku. They didn't talk to each other for the entire 2 weeks, and he honestly got really bored. Izuku said that the UA Sports Festival, it was actually his most favorite thing to ever watch on TV. So many quirks, so many abilities he could write down, so many ways people could have used them. He honestly was very happy about it. They were told about the first event, an obstacle course. And thus, they lined up outside and they greeted everybody to a large stadium of cheering fans. Luffy would try and look through the stadium. Izuku would ask what Luffy's doing, as Luffy stated, "I can't find Ace, Garp, or even Sabo." Izuku then states, "Well, it is a large stadium. It's almost impossible for you to see him." As Luffy has to go onto a podium since he was the number 1 student. Luffy looks into the podium and looks in the crowd. He then spots Ace, Garp, and Sabo, but they're with more people. In between Garp and Sabo, there were 2 other people beside Ace. On his left, a pale man with blonde hair, and on his right, a clearly pale girl with white hair, green highlights, wearing a kimono. Luffy stands on the podium board, looking into the crowd, into the audience, as he smiles. He taps the mic a few times, and Luffy, with a straw hat on his head, would then say, "I declare, I decided that I'm going to be the number 1 hero, and I don't care if I die for it. It doesn't matter if I win this tournament, because honestly, winning this tournament doesn't mean that I won't be the number 1 hero. But it would be pretty awesome if I did. But if I were to say anything inspiring on the top of my head," this is Luffy scratches it. "Look, if you don't take risks, you can't create a future. So don't you ever back out. Don't you ever hold back. Because the second you do, I will be there, and I will win." Luffy stares into the crowd as he would then laugh and chuckle and walk away. As he then would look into his classmates as they'll try and decipher what Luffy just said. Did Luffy declare that he was going to win, or that he wouldn't mind if he lost? As then Mr. Mike would yell on the announcements on the whole huge speakers, well, I guess that means the UA Sports Festival is about to begin. As everybody lines up for the first event, which is an obstacle course, a small tunnel, Luffy stands at the very back as he yells, "Alright, on 3, 1, Luffy runs back. 2, now he's up against the wall, as he then stretches his arms to the edge of the tunnel, as he would then say, "Gomu, gomu no." And then he says, 1, go, as he then yells, "Slingshot," as he zooms across all of the students and getting a good head start. Luffy begins running, and as the students begin to cram, Luffy would laugh to himself. Todoroki would then freeze everybody. As Todoroki would continue moving. "Straw Hat, you and me aren't finished." As Luffy would then smile. "Aren't finished? I didn't think we had a thing to start with." As Todoroki would try and catch up to Luffy, and eventually he does, a bunch of 0-point robots would get in front of Luffy and Todoroki. Luffy would stretch his arm back as he then says, "Gomu gomu no, rifle," as he destroyed one robot and yelled, "Get out of my way," as he destroyed another one with rifle again. Luffy kept on staying in the lead as Bakugo and Todoroki were right behind him. Todoroki would then state, "You won't beat me, Straw Hat." As Luffy smiles, "Well, that's the thing that you get to decide for yourself, huh?" As Todoroki would then try and freeze Luffy, but Luffy knew that ice is pretty much his natural counter, so he tried staying away from Todoroki, but Bakugo was using blast, and of course Luffy is strong against blunt force attacks. As a matter of fact, most punches don't hurt him, but explosions are a different story. Right now he is wedged between two of his greatest weaknesses, and now has to think of a way to get past them. Luffy then does, as he then uses a split second, a gear second, and to get a head start. He would then jump and and as Bakugo and Todoroki are flinging forward with great speed, he actually grabs the back of the shirts of Bakugo and Todoroki, and as they are going forward and he's going backwards, he then yells, "Gomu gomu no, improvised slingshot," as he then zooms past both Bakugo and Todoroki, and Bakugo and Todoroki are caught off balance with the great amount of force, making them fling backwards. As President Mike would lose his shit as he then yells, "Whoa, did Luffy just use Bakugo and Todoroki as pillars for his Gomu Gomu no slingshot?" The crowd would go wild, and Ace, Sabo, and Garp would yell at the top of their lungs. Ace would then feel a nudge as he would sit down, as the girl would then tell Ace, "You're getting real excited for your brother, huh?" As Ace would smile, "Of course, it's Luffy. I expect him to win." As then the guy beside Ace would then state, "I expect him to win too. Hey, you think Whitebeard would actually allow him to join our agency so soon?" Ace would state, "No, not yet, but one day he will." Garp would then kind of sigh, "I'm still mad about you joining Whitebeard's agency." As Ace would smile, "Who was I supposed to join? Yours, old man?" As Garp would just grunt again, "You guys are getting too cocky on your young age." As Luffy kept the lead, he'd then have to cross a cavern, but this was just a stroll in the park for Luffy. Using the giant pillars within the cavern, he just swung around them and gaining even more speed. Meanwhile, Bakugo and Todoroki still had to catch up. And then the landmines, which again, another stroll in the park. Of course, Luffy would have a problem with this, but he'd simply stop and stretch his arms, eventually reaching the other side, and he'd jump as he yelled, "Gum gum slingshot." As he then was about to, as he got halfway there, he did land on a mine and made him fling up. He noticed that Bakugo and Todoroki were catching up. He then grabbed to the ground through the air and swung his whole body down. Again, another explosion, but Luffy stayed, as he then raised his arms into the air, and then he leaned forward as he then did a semi front flip, and then yelled, "Gum Gum Bazooka Boost!" as he then used Gum Gum Bazooka to boost him the other half of the landmine field. Izuku got first place. Meanwhile, this was happening. Luffy got first place. Meanwhile, this was happening. Izuku had his plan and basically got second. Todoroki got third, Bakugo got fourth, and everybody else went around the same order. Luffy would smile as he got first place, holding a straw hat on his head. As he then laughed as he sought out and saw Ace, Sabo, and Garp cheering for him. Luffy would just simply chuckle to himself. This is the best day of my life. As everybody was getting settled in, Midnight would explain the cavalry battle. See, in this great day and age, heroes sometimes have to collect villains, like bounty hunters. And just like that, we put bounties on all of you depending on the placement. Luffy got 1 million. As Luffy would smile, everybody was staring daggers at him, but Luffy simply stared back. As Luffy would then state, "I know I'm handsome, but you don't have to keep staring at me." Luffy seemed as cocky as everybody would say to himself, but this wasn't cockiness from Luffy. It was simply him having fun. It didn't matter if he won or lost. He didn't really care as much, but winning would have been cool. Midnight would then proudly exclaim, "This is the cavalry battle. You have to have a team of 4 people, and the leader cannot fall. If they do, the team is out." As Luffy would then look around, a team. Who can possibly be part of my team? Maybe Kaminari. He has electricity, and therefore I'm not affected by it. As Izuku would walk up to Luffy, and Uraraka would be right with him. Izuku would proudly ask, "Hey Luffy, you want to join my team?" As Luffy would just smile, "As long as I'm head of it." As Izuku would then state, "Oh, I mean, okay." As then Luffy, Izuku, Uraraka, and since I don't want and Tokoyami, which means yes, Mei Hatsume sadly is not gonna be part of this team. The cavalry battle starts as everybody charges for Luffy, as Luffy would then tell everybody, "Alright, duck your heads." As everybody would be confused, Luffy would spin his entire body rapidly as he then yelled, "Gamu Gamu no, windmill!" As he then created a sort of barrier around them, as Luffy would then yell in a reverberated voice, "If you want to get near me, then you have to not be afraid to get hit." As then everybody would kind of back off, and this almost made everybody try and fight each other instead. Luffy would then tell Uraraka to make sure they could stay up high. As they do, Luffy then tells Izuku, "Now I want you to hit the ground as hard as possible to give us a good boost." Izuku's almost worried, but what if as Luffy then states, "Break your bones, don't break your bones." What did I say? If you don't risk, you can't make a future, right? Now take a damn risk. As Izuku would then flick a finger and create a giant boost, launching Izuku and his entire team into the air. But Izuku would look at his finger. It's not broken. Izuku would laugh and Luffy would cheer with him. "I told you, you can't make a future without a few risks involved." Now Luffy would then state, now this is a very simple plan. If we stay up here, I can use Gum Gum Pistol, or maybe even Gum Gum Bullet, to grab bandanas. Izuku would then state, wait, you want to grab other people's bandanas? Luffy would then state, hell yeah, there's clearly enough to surpass me. Remember, for this entire game is just taking bandanas from people. Luffy would then say, Gum, as he looks at a weak team. He saw a man wearing, with a purple, with purple hair, as he then said, bullet, as he charged at this man with purple hair. The man simply slapped away Izuku's hand, and he looked at Izuku. Izuku almost said what, but only said it in his head. Thank God. As Bakugo would see Luffy in the air. Shit, they're taking the easy route. Bakugo bursts into the air and tries to get Luffy off his entire horse. Bakugo would then tell Luffy that he won't win like that, as Luffy would then punch Bakugo in the chest in mid-air. As Bakugo would get thrown down, luckily his team was able to save him before he hit it. Luffy's entire team begins to slowly descend, and as Luffy would then state, okay, maybe I have to do some extreme measures. Luffy would get on top of his friends, and everybody again tried rushing him at the same time, but this time, Kaminari actually tried zapping Luffy, as then Luffy would then yell, Gum Gum Blanket, as he would stretch his body over his team so most of their bodies could get shocked. Kaminari would be confused. Wait, how are you not dead yet? As Luffy would then smile, I'm rubber. As Denki Kaminari would be like, wait, what does that mean again? As Luffy then stated, you can't hurt me. As he jumped in the air and compressed his entire body and spun a bit, as he yelled, Gumu Gumu no, firework. As then he hit pretty much every surrounding team, and he was able to grab a few bandanas, with Luffy being at 1,500,000. It didn't do a lot, but it kept them in the lead. And their strategy doesn't really change all that much. But it does get really hard around the end point, as a few teams have been knocked out, but a few of the main ones actually are still in it, with Todoroki's main plan being into effect. Ida uses turbo burst, and reciprocal burst turbo, and as he does that, basically, Todoroki was about to get Izuku's bandanas, but Izuku had a great idea. Izuku launched his head in the air, as then Todoroki accidentally grabbed his neck. Luffy's head would then spiral back down, as he then said, Gumu Gumu no, head guillotine. As he then pretty much crushed, and I'm talking straight up crushed, Todoroki's hand the second it was laid on Luffy's neck, and thus ending the cavalry battle. For context, pretty much most of the main stuff, it's really boring and I don't want to get into it, that's why I skipped it. But now we get into the tournament. Now the brackets stay exactly the same, and that one change is gonna be, instead of Meihatsume, we're gonna switch it out with Luffy. And also, so you guys know that padding runtime, Izuku and Shinzo stays exactly the same. So does Todoroki and Saro. Shinozaki and Kaminari also would stay the same. And here is when we get Ida versus Luffy, and right before the fight, Luffy is hyping himself up because he already knows he's gonna win. Bakugo blurs through the door. You better not lose, you loser. Luffy smiles to himself. Bakugo, rubber is like better than whatever quirk he has. Bakugo is like, yeah, explain. As Luffy would then explain himself that blunt force attacks just don't work on him. As Bakugo would then smile, then why are you telling me this? we're most definitely going to be seeing each other in the final rounds. Luffy would then smile, cause I'm not worrying about it. After all, this is just a fun game. Luffy walks onto the stadium and he hears the roaring cry of his name from Ace, Sabo, and Ace's friends in Garp. Ace and Sabo are doing a giant inferno, and as a little present, it has a giant straw hat. Luffy looks up in glee, as he really wants to talk to them after all this is said and done and over with. Luffy would look at Ida, as Luffy would then state, Ida is very fast. Should I introduce it now, or nah? Something like this needs build up. I'm just gonna use my wit and my natural speed. Ida would then tell Luffy that this is where he draws the line. He won't be surpassed by some wannabe hero. Luffy would then jump as he begin to warm himself up. I can't wait to fight you again after this, Ida. This is gonna be so fun. As President Mike would yell 3, 2, and then Midnight would crack her whip. Go! Ida would blitz towards Luffy. Ida will blitz towards Luffy, and Luffy excitingly would predict this as he would then yell, Gamu Gamu no, balloon. Ida would kick Luffy's stomach, but it would just bounce off Luffy. Luffy would then deflate as he then was about to stretch his arm back for pistol, but remembered that he's actually restricted. See, since he's not allowed to go past the tournament, past the block that they're in, most of his attacks that require him to stretch, now he is restricted to only the area that he's in. But Luffy didn't see this as a problem, as Luffy simply charged towards him and stretched his arms, as he would then yell, Gamu Gamu no Bazooka. As he then made contact with Ida, Ida was almost pushed off the rink, but Ida had one more trick up his sleeve. He went for another turbo. Sorry, I don't remember the name of his attack. Basically, he goes above like one for all, whatever the fuck you guys want to talk about it, and like his engines burst open. You know, he's going at the highest speed he could possibly go, but Luffy just simply goes Gamu Gamu no balloon again, and Ida bounces himself off Luffy and out of the rink. Ida is sat there in silence as he got out in the first round, but it technically was his own fault. Luffy reached his arm up to Ida, and Ida would grab his arm, as Luffy would then smile. That was a fun match, but honestly, you kinda had it coming. I mean, I'm rubber. Blunt force attacks don't work on me, Ida. Someone as smart as you should have known that. As he would then walk down towards Ida's level, as they both walk out the ring, as Midnight would declare Luffy the winner. All the other matches go the exact same. Ashido versus Naval Boy, because I can't pronounce his name. Ashido wins. Tokoyami versus Momoya Rozu. Tokoyami wins. Tetsu versus Kirishima, originally a draw. And then Uraraka versus Bakugo. Now, originally, Uraraka actually may have stood a chance because Bakugo wasn't holding back, but now Bakugo really wants to fight Luffy, so he demolishes the absolute fuck out of her. But when everybody's screaming at Bakugo, it's actually the girl Ace is with that actually stands up for Bakugo, stating that he's giving her the respect that she deserves by not holding back. So yeah, instead of it being Aizawa, it's the girl that Ace is with, and everybody's like confused of who she is, but Ace simply smiles and Luffy smiles, even though Luffy doesn't know who she is yet. Then Kirishima versus Tetsu wraps itself up, and now we're in the semifinals. I mean the quarterfinals, my bad. Now we have Izuku versus Todoroki. And this goes exactly the same, only I think would have more heart. Remember, Luffy had a big impact on Izuku's life, and Todoroki really wants to show that he's better than both Izuku, Luffy, and Bakugo. If anything, I believe Izuku, it's a lot easier for Izuku to like pretty much make Todoroki uses flames in this version. So yeah, Todoroki uses his flames and it's a lot easier to him, and now it's almost like a heavy burden was lifted off his shoulders. But yes, Izuku still loses and Todoroki advances to the semifinals. Now we have the Vine Hair Girl, because I can't pronounce her last name, against Luffy. And Luffy seems to be a bit in trouble. Luffy walks up, and just like with Bakugo versus Uraraka, Luffy smiles, stating that he's not going to hold himself back because of some girl. In this world, if you want to fight, it doesn't matter your gender, age, or even how sick you are and stuff. If you want to fight, you'll get one from him. Luffy remembers that, yeah, she has Vine, so this will be a lot harder. But he had a plan for this. The Vine Girl would create a giant tsunami attack and wrap Izuku in all directions. Just as Midnight was about to call the match, Luffy reveals Gomu Gomu no Gear 3rd. As his voice was heard throughout the entire stadium, thus causing Midnight to hesitate, and Luffy's giant fist to break out of the vines, rising into the air. As Luffy would then jump, the air from the fist went to his belly, and then to his foot. Then he raised his foot high in the air as he yelled, Gomu Gomu no Battle Axe. As his foot covered around half of the stadium, it destroyed half of the stadium as the Vine Girl had to leap to the other side. Luffy then released a ton of air, but he was being smart with it. He released it on the hand on which he bit it, thus making that arm go numb, but he released it in such a way that it propelled him towards the Vine Girl. As he did, he flung his arm back and twisted it as he yelled, Gomu Gomu no Rifle. As the rifle connected, the Vine Girl used her vines to cover herself, but the vines were twisted and torn, thus the girl was hit and knocked out of the ring. Because the ring was destroyed, it then called an intermission. Luffy was then announced the winner, since he, technically speaking, never went outside the area of the tournament grounds, I guess you could say. Because of this, Luffy got to meet Ace and Sabo. They all congratulated Luffy on his double win, and Ace introduced two of his friends. Ace would introduce Marco, the blonde-haired, weird-looking fellow, and Luffy comments that Marco's face and head is shaped like a pineapple. Marco chuckles as he would turn to Ace. You did say your little brother had a sense of humor, huh? I'm Marco, Ace's friend. We go to the same hero agency. As Luffy would smile. So you work with Whitebeard too. What's your quirk? As Marco would demonstrate. My quirk is a phoenix quirk. I can heal people with my flames, but with my talents, I can heat them up and create devastating attacks. Luffy would smile and say that's really cool, and would ask if they could fight one day. As Marco would state, I'd likely win. As Luffy would ask why is that, Marco states, just like Ace, I can control almost every inch of me, which means any attack that you would land on me, I can just turn that part of my body into flames, and thus negate your whole shtick, Luffy. As he then flicks his straw hat, Luffy smiles, stating that they'll fight one day and he'll win. As he looked towards the girl, and what's your name? As the girl stood up, but revealed her giant height. She was around, let's say, 7 feet. It was One Piece character's height, so no, not 7 feet. Nah, Ace is fucking tall too. So she's 6 foot. She's as tall as Ace, and Ace is fucking tall. She reveals her unnatural height, and Luffy almost gets scared, but he does look her in the eyes and asks for her name, as she would then loudly declare, "My name is Yamato." As Luffy would smile, stating, "Nice to meet you, Yamato, but how do you know Ace? You're his friend too, right?" Yamato would almost blush and say, "Yeah," but Ace would then state, "Okay, look, Luffy, Yamato's my girlfriend." as Luffy would have a giant grin on his face. I knew you could get one. So, you're my older brother's girlfriend, right? Could you fight? As Ace would kind of laugh, same with Sabo. Yamato states, I could kick your ass any day, Luffy. As Luffy would ask to fight Yamato, Ace would state maybe after the tournament. But right now, you gotta focus on your opponents. As the intermission time was over, Luffy went into the stands with the other UA students. Mina versus Tsukuyomi. I keep forgetting. Yeah, Tsukuyomi. I can't say his name right. Ever. Goes exactly the same, and Tsukuyomi wins. And Kirishima versus Bak goes the same, and Bakugo wins. Now the quarterfinals are about to begin. Todoroki versus Izuku. Todoroki versus Luffy. Jesus Christ. Todoroki versus Luffy. Luffy goes up to the giant platform. It's a bit different. As Todoroki would look at Luffy, Luffy would realize Todoroki is his natural enemy elemental wise. Once rubber slows down, he's practically useless. So maybe now is time he busts out his special move. Luffy would tell Todoroki that he's not gonna hold back, and neither should he. As Todoroki looks at his hands, fire and ice, which one should he use? It's only reasonable to start by slowing him down, the bombastic monkey. As they tell him to go, Todoroki instantly freezes the entire stadium. But Luffy extends his arm. A bit of arm that was exposed, they see this weird lump going through Luffy's arms to his fist and back to his main body. He then sees steam coming from the ice. As Midnight was about to declare this match to be over, again she's interrupted by Luffy's loud laughter and loud voice. Gomu Gomu no, Gear second. As Luffy's body would then turn pink and steam would rapidly course off of him. He then blitzed towards Todoroki as he then yelled, Jet Bullet! As he then punched Todoroki in the stomach in a unnatural speed. This would even catch Ace a bit off guard. He's a lot faster now. You still think you could take him on, sweetie? As he looked at Yamato with a cocky grin, Yamato looked back, of course. As Luffy would then ask if Todoroki had enough, Todoroki uses flames to propel him up towards Luffy and coat his entire left body in ice. He then tried and freeze over Luffy again, but he was too fast as he used a jet bazooka to propel himself into the air. He then looked down at Todoroki and told Todoroki he might need to craft himself an umbrella, cause now it's over. He cocked both of his fists back as he yelled, Gum Gum Jet! As Todoroki would cover the top part of his body, like creating a giant shield, cause he doesn't know what's to come. He then propels two giant ice dragons at Luffy. As he then finished his sentence, Jet Gatling! As a barrage of Luffy's fists come out of a giant gust of steam, and all that can be seen is the fist prints colliding with the ice. The two giant ice dragons were destroyed almost instantly, but Todoroki kept on making them, creating it like a hydra. To the audience, all they saw was steam propelling, and I mean bursting off Luffy, sending him to the air as Luffy goes up into the clouds. The ice dragons continued their march up towards Luffy, but then Luffy switches gears. Gear third, giant battle axe. As he then destroys the ice dragons, as he then exits gear third and back to gear second, as he cocks his arm again. Gomu Gomu no, jet rifle. As he then delivers a spinning punch at the ice dragons, destroying it and piercing through the shield Todoroki made. This even came through Todoroki's body, but Luffy uncaringly accidentally left a scar on Todoroki's cheek and on his shoulder. Blood gushed from Todoroki's shoulder, but he decided to end it off of a bang. He took his ice dragons again, but made sure they were hollow. Luffy yelled, "Didn't have enough?" as Luffy's eyes turned red and he began to laugh. Ace realized what's going on. He looked into Luffy's eyes and looked to Grandpa Garp. Grandpa Garp looked worried, as Ace would state, Is this it again?" As Garp would nod his head, "Not again. At least when it happened to you, you were a kid. But this is Luffy, his quirk awakened and all." As Sabo would look up to Ace. "Does that mean we have to stop the fight now, or should we wait? Maybe it's like Ace. Maybe he's gonna hold back." As Garp would look at Luffy, instead he would see Rock's days of back. As he looked down, but he might have to intervene depending on the attack he makes. As he yelled again, "Gumu Gumu no! Gear 3rd!" But this Gear 3rd was a special one. This was actually Gear 3rd, but also in Gear 2nd. As his fist was cocked back, Jet Giant! As Todoroki with the hollow ice dragons burst him into flame, rapidly heating him, causing explosions, he would yell, "Jet Giant Pistol!" As the giant fist, moving at the speed of Gear 2nd, was heading for Todoroki. And even with the explosions, even like making the speed damper, it wasn't enough. If this attack hit, it would have been fatal. If it hit. Garp realized, he blitzed towards Luffy and stopped the fight. The audience can only see a burst of wind and then seeing Luffy's giant fist being held back by Garp. But then Todoroki would stand right behind Garp as Garp would swing Luffy towards him and then punch him in the face. Luffy was knocked out of his trance and asked what happened, as Garp stated, "Either get a hold of yourself or quit." As he would then blitz back to his seat, Luffy was unaware of what happened, but did remember he was still in the fight. So he jumps back and tells Todoroki, "I think it's time to finish this." Todoroki stating, "Yeah, I think it is." As Todoroki would rapidly freeze the area and then heat it up, Luffy would simply just cock back his fists and yell, "Gumu Gumu no, Gatling." As this happened, it just went on forever and ever and ever. Eventually, both Luffy and Todoroki were left bloody. They walked towards each other, Todoroki for a punch, but just like Luffy said, blunt force attacks don't really work on him. Luffy stretched his arm back as he said, "Gum Gum Pistol." It connected, a devastating hit on Todoroki, sending him flying back and out of the ring. Luffy was declared the winner after 30 whole minutes of fighting. And if you've ever been in a fight, you'd know fighting for 30 minutes straight is exhausting. Luffy passed out and was sent straight to the infirmary. Next was Bakugo versus Tokoyami, and unlike Luffy versus Todoroki, not only wasn't as dramatic, it didn't take long. Bakugo was the natural counter to Tokoyami, and thus only took a few seconds. There was an intermission so Luffy could heal up, but if he couldn't heal up in 15 minutes, or at least have enough stamina to fight, then Bakugo would be declared the winner. But Bakugo wouldn't accept this, as he yelled towards Spikes and Mike, "They're gonna stay here until Luffy can fight him. He wants to prove to everybody once and for all that he can beat this so-called number one hero." Luffy is in the infirmary. He's passed out, but the nurses are, Recovery Girl kisses Luffy, and most of his stuff, he gets healed real quickly, but he is stamina drained, and pretty much people are saying he can't fight. but Garp simply pulled out a huge steak. Luffy pretty much grabbed that shit with a hand, shoved it down his mouth, and he jumped for joy, almost like all of his energy was replenished for food. Garp would then tell Luffy, if you ever feel like you're going through a trance, either slap yourself or quit right there. Luffy asked why Garp punched him, as Ace would explain. Luffy, our bloodline, it's weird. As Garp would state, do you ever wonder why we have the D in our name? As Luffy would state, I don't know. I never actually questioned it. What is it for, like David or something? As Garp would state, no. D means devil. We are devils. Monkey D, more specifically. And yes, we're not actual devils, but it actually is referred to a singular quirk. A quirk that is dormant in all of us, but we can all activate. It's almost like we all had two quirks. It's just one would rarely show up. It's rare for a D member to actually activate this quirk, but when it is activated, it can be devastating. Only 3 people within the last 100 years, 4 people now, including you, for the last 100 years of the D-Clan recorded history, was even able to activate this quirk. As Luffy would ask who they were, he would then state, Rocks D Zabek, Gold D Roger, Monkey D Ace, and now you, Monkey D Luffy. If you would look at Sabo, you haven't activated it yet? Sabo would then state, I haven't really been pushed to the brim, nor have I been always thrilled for fighting, so that could be it. Garp would state, there's a theory when a D-Clan member is either doing something that they love passionately, then, well, it could activate, and it can be devastating. There once was a theory that one D-Clan member would inherit the will of either Rocks D Zabek or Sun God Nika, aka Gold D Roger. As Garp would state, the reason why he never liked Gold D Roger is because just like Rocks D Zabek, he allowed this gene to take over him. His thrill for fighting, villains, stealing, doing what he wants came from this quirk. And like Rocks D Zabek, with him murdering whenever he wanted, he allowed it to take him over. I wanted to take you guys in so that you guys would never end up like your fathers. As Ace would look confused. I thought you said our father left, same as his mother. As Garp would state, after this tournament, we're going to have a serious family discussion. Now that I'm worried that Sabo might be next, I think it's time I tell you about your true heritage. None of you guys are actual blood brothers. Well, not full, half, only sharing one mother. And all of your fathers are, well, let's just say not the best of people. No, and that's why I had to take you guys in. Ace would almost be mad at this, stating, don't tell me, I really don't care. As he walked out, Sabo chased after Ace, and Yamato and Marco chased after Ace as he left in a huff, almost mad. As Luffy got up, stating that he has to fight this last round as quick as possible. Garp looked sad. Yamato would ask Ace why he's so mad, as Ace would then state, a secret he's been keeping from us for 18 years. I could have known my dad by now. The guy I've been wondering where he's been for all my life, and he knew who he is and where I can find him, but he told me not to. What, because he doesn't trust me? Yamato would tell Ace it's not that he didn't trust you, he didn't trust your dad. Now the fight would commence. Bakugo versus Luffy. Bakugo fighting for glory and the credit, but Luffy trying to fight as fast as possible, trying to end it as fast as possible for answers that he didn't really care about, but knew he needed to hear. When Midnight cracked her whip, they were both steadily focused. Luffy threw the first punch. Gumu Gumu no, Kira's second. Jet Gatling. As he Bakugo would be berated by a barrage of punches, but Bakugo was able to dodge most of them, using an explosion to propel him to move quicker and quicker. Is that your only move you know, nerd? As he would then blitz towards Luffy. You told me blunt force attacks don't hurt you, but what do you say about explosions? Bakugo allowed a burst of an explosion hitting Luffy. Luffy was burnt, but he wasn't done yet as he was flung towards the air. Bakugo was a really good hand-to-hand fighter. Luffy was pretty much getting mixed right now. Bakugo let out an explosion in Luffy's face, but Luffy used this as another attack. He knocked back his face as he said, "Jet Wrecking Ball," as he would then headbutt Bakugo. It would land, and Bakugo was almost dazed, allowing Luffy to go into gear 3rd. Gomu Gomu no giant pistol, knocking back Bakugo a few centimeters. Bakugo's will would not allow him to fall. Bakugo stated, "Let's just cut the crap. Let's give them what they want to see. Your best attack versus my best attack. Let's see who's more devastating." Luffy's eyes almost flickered, but he would slap himself in the face. "Alright, Bakugo, give it to me." Bakugo would launch himself in the air. Then he would rapidly spin, while launching towards Luffy. As he would then yell, "This is my Howitzer Impact!" As the Howitzer was about to impact Luffy, Jesus Christ, Luffy cocked back his arm in gear 2nd, and then used jet rifle, but he would realize he missed. He would cock back his arm as fast as he can because he knew that if Bakugo hit him and over him, as he then switched his attack. Using the flow of cocking back jet rifle, he then used bazooka to launch himself into the air. His eyes grew red again. Getting launched into the air, he was launched to the sky. This time, he wasn't gonna hold anything back. Jet Gatling. As a barrage of fists, like an arrow to an army, Bakugo had nowhere to go. He tried to move, but he couldn't. The fist eventually engulfed him, his entire body getting pummeled by Luffy's fists. As Luffy just kept on hitting him and hitting him and hitting him, making sure he stayed down, Bakugo still was resisting. He was trying to get back up, even with the barrage of Luffy's punches. As Bakugo would then yell, "Howitzer! Howitzer!" As he would then yell, "Howitzer Booster!" As he would compress his sweat around a single point and blast like a rocket towards Luffy. As Luffy would realize this, he had no other choice. Gum Gum Balloon. Bakugo would slam his face into Luffy's stomach, and Luffy would pull him back to the ground, Bakugo hitting the ground, as Luffy would then state Gum Gum Cannonball. As he would bounce on Bakugo's body over and over again, he'd deflate. Both of Luffy's arms were now paralyzed, and his body felt like it would give at any moment. Bakugo would get back up. Bakugo would then look at Luffy. "So, you clearly have something to prove." As Luffy would then state, "No, I really don't. I just want answers, that's all." Bakugo would laugh. "I wanted answers too. Answers to who is the strongest, me or you. You talked a lot of game, but it turns out I'm more of a match for you than you realized." Luffy had enough. Now he was done playing. As he would then state, "Shut up." Bakugo would launch himself towards him. As Bakugo would yell that Izuku is stupid, Izuku would then end the fight then and there. Bakugo blacked out. Nobody saw what happened, but President Mike, who was recording it, replayed it. In a few frames, Izuku used Gum Gum Jet Battle Axe. He did a front flip extending his leg, and then using his leg as a battle axe, hitting Bakugo, and it went back to him in just a few frames. Luffy was declared the winner. Luffy walked off the stage, and he wasn't there for the podium, as he was talking to Garp with Ace and Sabo in a room. After a while, Luffy was given the gold medal, but not in public. But it was stated that Luffy had to leave for private reasons. Luffy going home, he was saddened that day. We flash back to when Garp told Ace and Sabo and Luffy who their fathers were. Garp started with Luffy since he was the youngest. Listen, your father was Monkey D. Dragon. That's where you all get your name. As Garp would frown. Look, your mother, she loved you all, but she didn't want to lose her love of Dragon. So she became a vigilante with him. Luffy would clench his fist, but then release. That was what she wanted, so I'm not that mad about it. As Sabo was next. Your father is the crime lord Don Quixote do Flamingo. As Sabo would be a shock. I'm related to. Yes. Then Garp would look towards Ace. As Garp would then state, Ace, your father was Gold D. Roger. Ace would be in shock. How is that possible? He died 20 years ago. I'm 18. As Garp would shake his head. That's what the public wants you to know. Hell, that's what most heroes think they know. But I know the truth. I was actually there. He didn't die. It just looked like he did. During that explosion, nobody found his body. Well, nobody but me. I went back. He was still my friend. I still respected him. I picked up his body. He was withering away. He came with a sickness. And then, well, your mother, she couldn't let go of that love. She wanted to make sure a piece of him stayed within the world. Even though he succumbed to the Monkey D curse, he still loved you. As Ace was in shock, his father was the #1 vigilante, the man who ended the #1 villain, and all of their fathers are, well, let's just say, not good people. Roger wasn't respected in the public eye. Garp would then state, I hate your last names, is because, well, if people found out who you guys really were, who you related to, well, Ace, you would have been hunted down by heroes and villains alike just because of your connections. There's a certain villain that would really love you, who'd want to study you. I couldn't have that. And Sabo, people would have cast you out for your name alone. The reason why Monkey D was, well, able to be kept is because that's my last name as well. I kept it. People know the Monkey D name as a name of heroes. As Garp would look at Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, seeing 3 different expressions. Ace of confusion, but a bit of pride and a bit of sadness. Sabo of devastation, and Luffy of complete calmness. Garp has never seen Luffy look so calm before. It worried him. Garp would state, the reason why it's the name of heroes is because you guys are ones. You guys are the best kids I've ever could wish for, and I loved raising all of you. Garp stood up, but if you all hate me for the information I kept, I won't hate you for it. As he walked out, Luffy would walk out with him, same with Sabo, and then eventually Ace. A week later, it was then stated that the entire UA class of 1A and 1B would take internships and Luffy got a lot because of his standing wheel and the fact that he was related to Garp. He found one quite interesting, as he, instead of every single other one, he chose one, Grand Torino. We then see Luffy and Hosu. Luffy is with Izuku and studying under Grand Torino. Luffy saw through Grand Torino's old guy stick, but obviously would play along with it because, well, it seemed fun. Grand Torino saw the way Luffy was using Gear Second and named it risky and unhealthy and stuff like that. Same with Izuku and the way he uses One for All. Thus, they all adapt Gran Torino's similar style when it comes to movement. But Gran Torino does look at Luffy. Your body's weird. Let me see. Why did you develop Gear Second? Luffy would then state, so I can go faster. Why did you develop Gear Third? So I can be stronger. Why don't you combine the two? It's not like, look, see, I can only do one at a time. Gran Torino would then state, who said that? Your body is, beyond any feasible comprehension of the human body as it is. Who's to say that you can't do something? A book? Come on. I've seen villains who are able to surpass the limitations of their own quirks. I believe you can too. Think of something, boy. As Luffy would spend the entire time training thinking of a new way to use his quirk, but he just couldn't come to him. What seemed possible, he couldn't understand it. But he did come to something. If he can't think of a way to get stronger and faster, maybe he can think of a way to get faster in Gear Second, and thus compressing came to him. What if he was able to compress his fist into his arm, and then like a spring his arm out, thus making it go faster? It was very hard trying to find a way to make it compress naturally, but eventually, throughout the weeks of training under Gran Torino, it eventually worked. And thus, Gear Second version, what should I call this? Gear Second Spring, spring versions came out. So basically be like Gear Second, instead of saying jet, he'd say spring. Because, I guess I'm just creative like that. Alright, enough tooting my own horn. And thus, eventually they do go out on parole and go on the same train, and the Nomu attack happens. And Ida is also still in Hosu for the exact same reasons, but since we're following Luffy's story instead of Izuku's, Luffy never noticed Ida actually acting strangely. Todoroki's still in the area as well, and Izuku knows this. And basically, they do run into the hero killer eventually, since Luffy and Izuku stuck together. When Ida is about to die, Izuku intercepts, and as the hero killer is off guard, Luffy introduced his new Gear Second Spring Bullet, as his compressed arm sprung into action, hitting the hero killer and creating a giant bruise, making him cough up blood. As Luffy would then state, "That's the hero killer, we need to get the heck out of here." Luffy would realize the multiple blades, as he would then state, "Yeah, no, we really need to leave." As Izuku would then state, "Why can't we just take him on right now?" Luffy would then state, "My quirk's weak to blades. Look, I'm not one for running away from a fight, but these guys need help." As he'd point to Ida and Native, Luffy would wrap his arms around Ida and Native and compress his legs, as he would then yell, "Gum Gum, Gear Second, Spring Boost." As he would burst over the rooftops, Stain would throw a sword at Luffy, piercing through his legs, and then connecting them together, and then he was pierced on a building, almost like a pin on paper. Luffy would scream in agonizing pain, but wouldn't drop Ida or Native. Izuku would kick Stain, but Stain would block it. Izuku would then text Todoroki to get to his location, And then Izuku versus Stain would commence, although Stain will eventually cut Izuku and paralyze him. Stain would state that he will kill Izuku because he was a true hero. Stain would then look at Luffy and say, "Same for you. You thought of the civilians first. Only a true hero would think that. However, the Ida boy must die, same as native. So let them go." Luffy holds onto them tight. "I'd never," as he would stretch his entire head to the sword and bite the handle and then rip it out of his legs. His legs would gush out blood, but he'd still be able to stand as he has a sword in his mouth. As then Stain will pull out a small knife. "If you want a sword fight, we can have a sword fight." Luffy would take the sword of his hands and stated, "I remember a few things about fighting with swords. And I remember the best thing about it. He can press the sword handle into his arm." And as he would then say, "Spring, jab," as the sword would bounce off of him, and then Stain would get pierced by his own sword as it would go through his shoulder, and because of the amount of force applied to the entire attack, he was flung across the other side and pinned to a wall, just like how Luffy was. And this was the shoulder, as Luffy states that he hopes that isn't a fatal wound, as he'd carry Ida in native and jump towards Izuku, as he would try and carry Izuku with Ida native and try and run away. However, he can't use spring. Luckily, Todoroki shows up, and Todoroki puts ice and kind of heals Luffy. However, Stain is trapped to the wall, and thus he is captured. So yeah, I'm sorry the whole Stain fight doesn't happen, but why the fuck would Luffy fight Stain if he can just save people first and then fuck off? And yeah, honestly, I believe Luffy would beat the fuck out of Stain. What the fuck is Stain gonna do? Luffy has light speed attacks, especially this Luffy. So if anyone has any problems, maybe I'll do a what if Luffy fought Stain, maybe a spin-off of this, but I don't see the Stain fight happening. So yeah. And thus, Hosu wraps up in a neat and tidy bow. After internships, they all come back, and as a collective, there is one last task: a final exam. Everybody instantly believes that this is going to be 0-pointer robots, and this test will be easy, but the teachers, all of them including Garp, are there, and they all state, "No, you're fighting me." But Garp does have to sit out due to his old age, and also the fact that it is actually well known that Garp and All Might are actually equivalent to strength, so it kind of wouldn't be fair, and also there's not enough students for Garp to be there. Garp's only there for the second and third years midterm final exams, so he's really here to watch Luffy. As All Might is aware of the D curse, so yeah, they do pit Luffy and Katsuki together, but also with Izuku, because there's gonna be a third one because there's a lot of students. It's an odd number, so yeah. And also Luffy is Izuku and Katsuki kind of balance each other out, so yeah. And they all fight All Might, and with that being said, all of the other exams happen exactly the same way. I will announce what happens, not what happens, I'll say who wins, who loses, but yeah. Luffy, Izuku, and Katsuki versus the symbol of peace, All Might. Luffy, Izuku, and Katsuki walk into the abandoned city as they hear the laughter of All Might, but Luffy isn't scared, as he simply laughs back. This Luffy would then grab his straw hat and yell, "This is going to be fun." Izuku thinks that they should concoct a plan, but Bakugo and Luffy, for once in their life, will agree that a plan isn't going to work. No plan's going to work against All Might. They simply have to fight. and Luffy knows a good way of doing it, as All Might would appear behind Luffy and state, "Oh yeah, and what's that?" as he'd punch Luffy to the ground. Blunt force attacks don't normally work on Luffy, but this one hurt, as he was knocked to the ground with an overwhelming force. He then pushed both Izuku and Mako away into different sections of the town. Luffy would try and get up, but All Might would ask for that gear second or third, but Luffy would state, "No, I just need gear first," as he'd bump up the skin, and then All Might's attacks would actually bounce off, as he'd state that it's clever, but what happens if his skin pops? A giant splat of blood. A giant scar, almost like when you pop a blister. Luffy's hand is in agonizing pain. They all heard it. And Garp, even though all the students think All Might's being a bit too harsh, Garp smiles as he states Luffy has been for worse. Luffy gets up, but All Might simply punches Luffy. Luffy is falling back, but Luffy has been through enough pain in his life that a simple scar on his hand isn't gonna be nothing. As Luffy inflates as he yells, "Gum Gum Balloon," All Might would yell, All Might would yell, what was it, Massachusetts Smash, and make a giant X-shaped slash, and thus Luffy's chest would be kind of, let's say, ripped open. Blood splats like every fucking where, and an X-shaped scar is on Luffy's chest as he is screaming in agonizing pain. All Might grabs Luffy and starts flinging him around, even using Luffy as a jump rope. As All Might asks, "Do you think you're strong? Just remember, there's always a bigger fish." As Bakugo would yell, "Unhand my sandbag!" as he yelled, "Hell is their impact!" All Might would use Luffy as a shield, and the entire attack was hit on Luffy's back. Luffy would scream out in pain, but then All Might would hear the zip-zap of all, one for all, as Izuku would yell, "One for all, Delaware smash!" hitting All Might on the chin, knocking him back and making him let go of Luffy. Izuku grabs Luffy. Luffy's about to be unconscious, but then All Might starts beating on Izuku and Bakugo. All Might seems to be a bit more excessive than usual. All Might states he is playing the villain. All Might begins to laugh, but this laugh was different. Instead of just a ha ha ha, it was z ha ha ha. He heard that laugh before. Z ha ha ha. It's so weird. But then he looks at All Might and sees a darkened figure, red eyes with giant dreadlocks, as it was z ha 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 ha. Z ha 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 ha. As a darkness overtook All Might, as Luffy would look over. That's not All Might. That's the man in his dreams. The man that would always cover the sun. Luffy gets up as he sees the bloody pulps of Izuku and Bakugo. Although Luffy is slightly hallucinating, Izuku and Bakugo aren't as that badly beaten, but to Luffy's eyes, it's almost like their friends are dead. All Might turns. All that power, all of that will, but you're still not strong enough to save your friends. Luffy would then look at All Might. Maybe not, but I have to keep fighting. As All Might would then state, "Don't you want your friends from dying? Take a step closer, and then I'll kill them both." The students begin to get scared. This is an All Might they've never seen before. A villain aside, but Garp still smiles. Mama would ask, "How can he still smile in a situation like this?" Garp says, "Luffy, well, he's been through worse." As Luffy would launch back with his fists. "You want to keep everyone from dying? That's naive. It's war. people die. As Luffy looks at All Might, and then All Might looks at him, seeing this will come from Luffy. He cocks his fist back as he would then state, "Gumu Gumu no." But as his fist retracts back towards Luffy, he feels it burn. The closer and closer he gets to Luffy, it burns more and more, and now it's on fire. He then laughs, "Gum Gum, Red Hawk!" As he then hits All Might with a flame attack, and the shockwave almost sets All Might on fire, but it does knock him back a few meters in general, actually. All Might would wonder what that is, as Luffy would then look at his hand. What was that? As Garp would laugh. Finally, the boy awakens it. As Momo would ask, what does he mean by it? Garp said, well, you see, Luffy's mother had a dormant quirk. It was a flame quirk. Now, I was always weirded out by the fact that Luffy had a rubber quirk instead of a flame quirk like his brothers, but then I realized it. The rubber quirk was the flame quirk. As he would then point at the screen and state, look, what happens when you make something move so fast? Almost too fast. I mean, if you make it go too fast, it might, as Garp would make it more simpler. What happens when a spaceship goes back into orbit? It sets on fire. It can as Momo realizes, Luffy's fruit Luffy's quirk allows him to move at such speeds where his fist can combust, but since stuff like flames don't really have as much of an effect on him, especially if it's coming from him, well, now he can. It's a combustion fruit. It's a combustion quirk. It's a combustion quirk, a secret one that he had this entire time, but wasn't able to activate it. Because in order for him to activate it, he has to be in a situation where his body felt like it needed it. Well, now it sure damn did. Luffy realizing that his body can now combust. He tried doing it at will, but it didn't work. He then instantly assumed that maybe his fists need to go at a certain speed, as he would then go gear second. As Luffy would then state, it's not like I'm not strong. You never gave me a chance to just power up a bit. As Izuku would try and grab Luffy's leg, trying to stop Luffy from trying to hit All Might, Luffy would place his hat on Izuku, stating, I need you to hold this one for me. Luffy would blitz towards All Might, and All Might would blitz towards Luffy. Luffy would cock back his fist. Red Hawk, he'd do it again. Red Hawk, he'd do it again. As now he yelled, Red Hawk Gatling. Now a bunch of Red Hawk fists were flung at All Might, and the shock waves were almost too much to bear. All Might's clothes began to burn off, but it didn't stop All Might's will, as he used a giant punch to make a gust of wind. This gust of wind then snuffed Luffy's flames, and All Might delivered another punch. All Might would then state, you're almost out of time. Your entire team will fail. What will you do then? As Luffy would then ask about the requirements once more time. As he would then look at Luffy. Well, it's either restrain me, beat me, or leave. As Luffy would then state, restrain, right? As All Might would ask what he meant by that, as he would then state, Izuku, I want my straw hat back. Izuku heard this, and he would then state, one for all, 1,000,000%, Delaware, Detroit. As he would then throw Luffy's hat at him. Luffy would grab his hat as he then state, Gumu Gumu no, robot. Luffy would then wrap his arms and legs around All Might. All Might would try and flex his muscles, but Luffy would stay on tight. And then Izuku would deliver a devastating punch towards All Might's face. But this wasn't enough, so Bakugo launched a barrage of explosions. All Might would scream, So that's how you want to play it. As he began to flex his muscles rapidly, but Luffy would then bite into his own shoulder blade as he then murmured, "Gomu Gomu no Gear Third." He would then inflate most of the bones in his body, making his body thicker in a sense, and thus making it All Might more restrained. All Might would be distracted by Izuku's massive punch, but Bakugo's rapid explosions, to the point where he didn't notice Izuku passing on handcuffs to Luffy. Luffy would then flex his entire body and thus constrain All Might, and he only needed to get All Might's wrists close enough where he can handcuff him. He then did, and Luffy let go, and he was kind of slingshot near a building. And then All Might stood there with his hands behind his back, cuffed. Izuku and Bakugo would fall to the floor. Luffy would then get up and smile and laugh as the challenge was declared over, and that Luffy, Izuku, and Bakugo passed the final exam. Midterm exam. Luffy would get up, and Bakugo and Izuku would get up and walk towards the gate. All Might would just simply break the cuffs and state, "Good game, Luffy, good game," as he looked at Luffy and for some reason still felt a hatred in him. All of the other exams, like I said, would go the exact same way, but if you seriously needed if you need a reminder, then I guess I can give you one. Basically, Shoto and Momo pass theirs, and then went against the Reeser Head. So yeah, they pass. Then let's see, Froppy wins hers. Honestly, you don't know. Everything stays the same. The only thing you guys need to know is that Mina and Kaminari do not pass theirs. So that's it. Thus, all the students rest up and are told that they will go into a field trip next week. But for now, they get a whole week off to train up and rest up, because this trip will be the hardest experience in their lives. Luffy went home satisfied with the day and simply smiled, thus ending the season 2 of What If Luffy was in My Hero Academia. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you later. Bye.